Sports Media here at Seton Hall, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's event, Hoop Dreams, Doris Burke and Bob Picozzi on basketball and broadcasting. So it should be an exhilarating afternoon, a wonderful discussion. Today's event is part of our speaker series here at the Center for Sports Media, and it's sponsored by the Picozzi Family Foundation, which is founded to provide academic assistance and scholarships to young people in need. The Center for Sports Media was founded in 2021 with a gift from esteemed alum Bob Lee, who set the standard for excellence in journalism and in broadcasting. But even more important, he is led by example by being a first-class person and paying it forward. There is no better than Bob Lee, both in the field and as a person. I've had the distinct pleasure of working with Bob Lee for the past 7 or 8 years, and I can tell you that there's no better example for our students here at Seton Hall. Bob is always available to help our students, and he played a big role, even though he's not with us. He's in Key West, so everybody say hi, Bob. He's watching here on the live stream. He played a key role in today's event, in not only the planning, being a sounding board for me and for all of us, but for our students in the 2 videos that you're about to see in a few minutes. Here at Seton Hall, we are all about our students. Teaching them and creating opportunities inside and outside the classroom. Junior Farnsworth Hendrickson was the editor and producer on these 2 videos that you're about to see. And I can say he did an outstanding job, was extremely dedicated. We set a high bar for him, and we didn't lower that bar, and he reached it and it exceeded it. Farnsworth as executive producer for this video was none other than Bob Lee. Now, what an opportunity for our students. It takes a village to build a center, and I would like to thank several people, notably the university administration, which has been very supportive of the Center for Sports Media, led by Interim President Passerini, for their support. I would also like to thank our new College of Human Development, Culture and Media Dean, Brian Crable, for his unwavering support of the center and everything that we've done. It created a foundation for success. In addition, I would like to thank our founding director, Jane McManus, who worked tirelessly in our first 2 years here and laid a great foundation for success and helped set the standard for some of the things that we're doing. I would like to acknowledge also 2 people behind the scenes, Sharon Fuse and Donna Hilton, who have done all the little things behind the scenes, and without them, today would not be possible. Finally, I'd like to thank our students. Without them, none of this would be possible. They come in like sponges, they're engaged, they inspire us, and they help us to reach new heights and explore and innovate day in and day out. Now I would like to welcome one of our finest alums, someone who cut his teeth right down the street at WSOU and reached new heights and had a very distinguished career in all forms of sports broadcasting. And he's continued to give back in many ways, not only with his foundation, but through WSOU, through our students, and he's helped inspire our next generation. So we have a quick video introducing one of our special guests.
And they beat a good Florida team which had not lost a game in the tournament, so let's look ahead for Purdue.
I always wanted to be a sportscaster.
Play-by-play announcer.
Comes out to Hooley for the win. 1.6 left.
Mary Stanford trailed by 8 late in the game. Then went on.
For decades since his time at Seton Hall, Bob Picozzi has exemplified excellence in his profession and his life. As a play-by-play announcer, a host, and a philanthropist, Bob has been a leader. He's enshrined in the WSOU Hall of Fame. A regional fixture across 19 years as the sports director at WTNH-TV in New Haven, where he was recognized with an Emmy Award and 4 times the Connecticut Sportscaster of the Year.
Welcome to one of our own, Bob Picozzi.
Thank you very much, BJ. I'd just like to add, tag on what he said about Bob Lee. Bob graduated from Seton Hall 4 years after I did, so we just missed each other. But we worked together at ESPN. We're very good friends, and without question, WSOU just celebrated its 75th birthday at a big dinner in Morristown last April, and Bob is without question, the most accomplished alum in WSOU history, and as BJ said, the founding father of the Smart Center for Media. BJ mentioned that I started at WSOU. Just you go out the front door, you go down the driveway. I did my first 60 games on WSOU. I was fortunate to hang around long enough to do more than 1,000 games, and equally fortunate to work with about 250 different analysts. And I want you to meet my favorite one of those 250.
You got to give DB a lot of credit. Hustling back from talking with the coaches. Look at the handle.
Training to my producer.
I would say welcome to Seton Hall, but more accurately, welcome back to Seton Hall.
Yes, yes.
So by my calculation, you wore number 11 in the visiting Providence uniform 4 times at Walsh Gym.
You're not going to get my stats.
No, I won't. Do you have any recollections? Walsh Gym's still around. It's still the home of the Fire Football
Yes. It's funny, as I was approaching campus, I always get a little bit nervous, believe it or not, public speaking. I made Bob do a Q&A because I hate, having to put together a speech. But that same nervousness I had as a player driving off the campus, I'm feeling it this afternoon. But it's a delight to be here. I loved my playing days, Bob. I loved it. I love the game.
And then you were back with the Providence team as an assistant coach under Bob Foley. And did you ever do a game at Walsh Gym as broadcaster?
I did. In fact, very early in my career, my first job as an announcer was Providence College women's basketball on radio. There was not a single listener, I don't believe. There were many times when my partner didn't show up and I was calling it over a phone line. Your entree to the field can be quite interesting. But I did. One of my first big assignments was Providence College women's basketball on radio at Walsh for the Big East tournament. Incredible.
So Doris and I first met 26 years ago. I remember the first game we did was in January of 1998. It was at Conti Forum at the Boston College campus. Boston College played Notre Dame. Notre Dame was nationally ranked. BC was not ranked. They had a great crowd on a Saturday night, and BC upset Notre Dame on a shot at or near the buzzer by Cal Bouchard, who I remember was from Toronto.
Yes.
Remember anything about that one?
I mean, it's an amazing thing to try to look back over 30 years. So I remember all of my games at Conti Forum because I played there as well. I don't remember that specific shot. I do remember the night and sort of the feel in the building, which is always the best part of what we do, right? Is the energy of being in an arena as two teams are squaring off.
So would you like, just between you and me, would you like to know what my take was on you after working with you?
Sure, absolutely.
I remember thinking that this person really knows her stuff. She really knows basketball. She knows basketball strategy, the nuances. She knows how to be a broadcaster. She knows how to communicate with the person sitting next to her. She has a good voice. You're going to roll your eyes now. She's very attractive, which, like it or not, is a factor in our very cosmetic business. And I felt there were only 2 things you were lacking. Care to guess what they were?
Confidence?
Exactly. And the other one was reps.
Reps, sure.
And of course, one led to the other.
Yes,
But I can honestly tell you, Doris, that I said to myself, that with some reps, she will get the confidence, and she is going to be a rock star in this business.
Wow.
So how did I do with that?
It's a pretty good prediction.
Another game we did, it's easy for me to remember the date because of something which happened earlier that day. It was Inauguration Day, and George W. Bush was inaugurated as the 43rd President of the United States at high noon on January 20th, 2021. We did the Pitt at Georgetown men's game that night at what is now called Capital One Arena. Georgetown was 15-0, and Pitt had a player named Julius Page.
Oh, tough as
Do you remember-
nails.
do you remember-
Of course I remember Julius Page.
And do you remember?
Tough as nails.
Do you remember one play in that game?
Was it an offensive rebound putback?
It wasn't a putback. In fact, we have it right here. In a game that I did.
That you called, yes.
And that shot is immortalized in a photo on the wall in the suite of basketball offices at the Peterson Event Center.
As it should be.
It was. He dunked it right in the face of a 7-footer named Reuben Boomche Boomche.
Boomche, Boomche, what a name.
And Pitt upset Georgetown that night. It was a big one. Ben Howland was the coach. And there was a guy named Fran Connolly who was an official. And I started out doing America East games on television, and Fran was one of the top officials in the America East, and then I guess I ascended the ladder, and I started doing Big East games, And Fran descended the ladder, and he started officiating. He did that game, and on his way up the court, after that dunk, as he went by our table, he went like this, and he said, "That was freaking awesome." He didn't use the word freaking, by the way.
Yeah.
So, even though Doris is from a Big East rival Providence, she's one of us. She is a Jersey girl. Not only that, she's a Jersey Shore girl.
Yes.
So you were born on Long Island, but
Yes.
you moved to Manasquan at 7?
7 years of age, yes.
And when did you first start playing basketball?
Literally, as soon as we moved, my parents bought a house that happened to be right next door to Indian Hill Park. And at 7, as you can imagine, I'm the last of 8 children, very Irish Catholic family. And with 10 people moving into a home, there's a lot of things. And the previous owner left a basketball in the backyard, and my mother picked it up and said, "Why don't you go over there?" And so I went to the park. I literally picked the basketball up at age 7, and I have not put it down. And it's really very hard for me to imagine my life without the game. Money was tight. My father worked for the same construction company for over 50 years. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, born and raised in Ireland, came to the country with no education. And, I don't want to overstate it, but I feel like in many ways the game saved me from so many things. It provided the single most important thing, and that was my education at Providence College. And it has now provided me an incredible career. I've worked beside some extraordinary people. Bob is one of my earliest and most selfless partners on the air. So I've always appreciated that about you. You understood that to have an exceptional broadcast, and the viewer doesn't know this, people in this room understand it because this is what we want to do or what we do. It takes so many people in so many different positions doing their job at a high level in order for a broadcast to be successful. And I was smart enough early to know the man beside me most often was a gentleman. Now it's changing. But I knew how important you were to however the game was going to unfold, and I always appreciated you were about 2 things. Making sure we documented the game, because essentially we're documenting history every time you call a game. There's something is happening of importance. And that you were about making sure the telecast was well done. Because if we did those 2 things, we could step off the air and say, we did a good job tonight.
Well, thank you. It really is a team effort, and we feel like, in a way, we're a bunch of gypsies where we descend upon this town. Or about, I don't know, for average college basketball game, maybe 25 people involved in production. I'm sure many more for the NBA game you're doing tomorrow night at Madison Square Garden between the Knicks and the Celtics. But you have to operate on the same page. You have to have the communication. On one side of me is the analyst, the other side is the person we call talent stats. And you have to learn a way to communicate with the talent stats. You have to learn a way to communicate with the person next to you. You're communicating with the producer and the director in the truck. And when it all works, it's like magic. It's magic. We try to make magic over a 2-hour period.
Yes, yes.
So you had 7 older siblings. How many boys, how many girls?
4 boys, 3 sisters. When we were young, my brothers and sisters would say, well, you're sort of half and half because you just play sports your whole life. So they would tease me mercilessly for my passion for the game. But 4 boys, 4 girls. And I was the first to be college educated. So there has been a couple since who've gone back. But yeah, basketball has provided so many things.
So Doris, at what age did the thought first occur to you that my ability to play basketball may enable me to go to college, to get a scholarship?
This is an interesting story because, now we can turn on a game every night of the week and you could find 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 games. I don't know. It depends on your cable package. When I was a young woman, there was one women's game on per year, and it was the national championship. First it was the AIAW, then the NCAA. And I'll never forget it because these are familiar names for anyone who's covered women's basketball. Old Dominion was always in the national championship at that time. The point guard was Nancy Lieberman. She was a great international player by the name of Ignason, and of course the great Ann Donovan. People here at Seton Hall familiar with Ann Donovan. And And during the course of this telecast, and it was appointment viewing, I knew when it was, and I knew to be in front of the TV on that particular weekend day, and the announcers actually said, these women are on scholarship. And I think I was probably 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and was about to embark on my high school career. And that, just having that thought in my head, I would go out to that park and think, well, maybe that could be me. That expression, you have to see it in order to believe it, was in fact true for this young woman.
So who, when you were just starting to fall in love with basketball, who were some of your basketball idols?
Yeah, well, there was only men's college basketball, and it was generally speaking, the Fighting Irish were on all the time, obviously a national brand going back even to when I was a kid. So Kelly Tripucka,
Jersey guy.
Yeah, Jersey guy, and a tremendous shooter, played for Notre Dame. I would say he was my first, and guys will find this hilarious, but the way my home was set up, there were hedges in the front, and I had won this purple jacket for winning a free throw shooting contest sponsored by the Elks. And I would watch a college basketball game at, say, noon or 2 o'clock on NBC, generally speaking. Al Michaels, Billy Packer, and Dick Enberg, who talk about 3 of the best to ever do it. I would watch this game, and I would pick up my ball, put my jacket on, run out between the hedges over to the basketball court, and reenact the game, and do it for hour upon hour. My mother always used to say, if I wanted to know where my daughter was, I pulled back the curtain, and I looked into the basketball court next door.
So what was the recruiting process like for you?
Yeah, not intense. I had offers to Boston University, Boston College, University of Massachusetts. Interestingly, I committed early to UMass, mostly under pressure from my father. I didn't love it. I had gone up there to school, but at the time it was my only offer, and my father is saying, you have to accept this. You can get your education paid for free. I make a verbal commitment. And I'm a believer in divine providence. And the coach got fired in March, and I went to my head coach and I said, I'm really interested in Providence College. Could you please contact the head coach? He makes one call. They had lost out on a point guard, Lynn Tye, who played at Villanova, remains an athletics director at Villanova. So I was their second choice, but divine providence put Providence College and myself together, and that's how I ended up there.
And Lynn Sheedy?
Lynn Sheedy was my coach the first 2 years, and then Bob Foley the next 2 years, yes, yeah.
And I know you have very close ties to Providence.
Yes.
And I know, being your friend for years, that you feel toward Providence the same way I feel toward this place.
Yes.
Tell me what is it about Providence that you find so special?
I mean, it feels like the profiles of these two institutions we're talking about are very similar. You know, the student body is relatively small. Class size relatively small relative to larger universities. I remember going up for my visit with my mom. We drove up and back the same day, and we had to park on lower campus. And I'm a very impressionable 17-year-old. My parents were trying to pay bills. Education wasn't necessarily important. There's real stress involved with that kind of situation. But we drove up and back, and we had to park on lower campus. And by the time I got to Alumni Hall, I think 5 people had literally said hello to my mother and I. It was just this very welcoming place. And, you know, I stepped on campus. I didn't turn 18, Bob, until November, almost Thanksgiving of my freshman year. And just a very nurturing, loving, you know, the priest on campus would, if you missed Mass, I'd call up Father John Peterson and say, I missed about 7 windows to go to Mass, and he would take 3 of my teammates and we'd go to this small chapel, and he would say a Mass for us. And I don't know, I just found it nurturing. I grew an extraordinary amount in every possible way imaginable. And it provided me an education. There was no communications major at Providence College. I was a social work and health service administration major. And when I tell you I had bad hair, bad teeth, bad clothes, and bad skin, and was afraid of public speaking, so naturally what do? I go into broadcasting. But, I literally, it just changed how I felt about myself as a young woman. The education was such a great foundation because it was a liberal arts education. So many reasons. When I hear you talk about Seton Hall, it makes me smile because I know how passionate you are, and I know what the people here must have been like for you, the same as they were for me.
So you mentioned that your first broadcasting job was doing Providence College women's games. At what point did you say, I think this is what I want to do?
Not one time. I literally never said that. So I coached for 2 years. In my second year, I got engaged, knew I wanted to get married and start my family. I did not think I could be a great basketball coach and raise my children well. I thought that would be a hard thing. My days as a basketball coach started at about 7 a.m. and finished at about 9 p.m. after recruiting calls. And so the year I left coaching, they put Providence College women's basketball on radio. Coverage of women's sports was starting to explode. And because I had played and coached there, they said, we think you should give this a try. And I kid you not, I always say my career is a happy accident. If you know that you want to be a broadcaster right now, as Bob did at 10 years old, that's amazing. For me, this sort of unfolded organically. Again, I go back to divine providence. First couple of years, just Providence College women's basketball on radio. The woman who was the Big East announcer, Sherry Levin, I believe, couldn't do a game one day. That was my first television game. I'll never forget it. You go to do the open, the most stressful thing, we've talked about that, because you want to nail this 2 or 3 minutes. The red light came on. I was terrified. I looked in every direction but at the camera. I mean, that was a disaster, you guys. So if you're making mistakes along the way, please just keep going. But this has literally unfolded, both at a perfect pace. I was able to raise my children and stay at home and kind of do a little bit in the winter, a little bit in the summer. But honestly, people say, well, what were your goals? Was this your dream? No. I mean, I tried to be exceptional at what I did every time I stepped on the air. I was terrified to fail. If I fail, it's going to be on national television. Who wants to do that? So I'd prepare like crazy. But I've been so blessed. I entered the field at the perfect time and had unbelievable bosses who just kept elevating my assignments. And as you know, you just try to do a great job. I always just say, what is my next game and how can I best prepare for that? And if I do that, usually it falls into place.
So we did a Big East women's package together that was put together by the network, the conference itself. And one time we were doing a Miami at Georgetown women's game. And the men's basketball team, this is when John Thompson Jr., who was Big John, the Hall of Famer John, the one who coached Patrick Ewing, his coach, and his practice was before the women's game, and it ran a tad long. It ended about 55 minutes before the women's game started. No one was allowed in the gym. The Miami team wasn't, the Georgetown women's team wasn't, and neither was the broadcasting crew. So when the crew got in there, they're stringing cables, and part of the format called for the analysts to record an interview before the game with the home team coach, and it would play at halftime as 1 of the segments. So our producer was Jim Dodonna.
Yeah.
And Jim is running around like crazy, and he's in our headset. He says, all right, we got to do this interview. He says, Doris, you got to do this in one take. You got to nail it. We don't have time to do it again. And Doris says, well, maybe you should have Bob do it. He says, I don't care who does it, but whoever does it better do it in one take. And then you say, do you mind doing it? I said, oh, I don't mind doing it, but can I ask you a couple questions? Well, I said, do you know these two teams? Do you know Patrick Knapp, the coach?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, have you ever done this before? So why wouldn't you do it in one take?
Yeah.
And then Jim said, all right, Bob, saddle up. And then Doris hits the push the talk button and says, Jim, if it's okay, I'd like to do the interview.
He's going to make me cry. Remember this moment? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And before, you said something which triggered another thought about the Open. We're doing a game at Providence, probably a men's game. And this is back in the old days when we would do the Open live. It was, frankly, was pre-9/11. After 9/11, we seldom did the Open live. So we would record we would do the open live on the floor on what we call sitcoms. And then it would be a commercial break, 90 seconds, and you'd have to move behind the table, sit down, put on your headset, and get ready to go. So you fumbled over something in the open. You sat down, and I could tell you were so angry at yourself. You were so, I mean, we're 85 seconds into the break, and you're still angry at yourself. And so I motioned to Doris, take the headset off, and I said, am I going to have to do this whole game by myself? And you looked at me like this, and I said, okay, so you fumbled the opening kickoff. We still have 59 minutes to go. Get your head in the game.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I always say this to my children in particular. Your friends tell you the truth. If somebody says hard things to you, generally speaking means they care about you, unless they're mean-spirited. Hopefully you don't run into too many of those people. But he snapped me out of a tough moment. And, there's a woman by the name of Beth Mullins, maybe the single most accomplished play-by-play woman in the country today. It's called Monday Night Football games. I remember the first night Beth Mullins called a Monday Night Football game. In fact, it's always when we had two. And there's a group of women on a group text that are all in the business. And most of us have been in it 25 to 30 years, so as you can imagine, we have some stories to tell. And I'm alone at my home in Rhode Island, and I'll never forget the pride I felt with Beth Mullins calling Monday Night Football. NFL is different than basketball. At least it feels different to me. And I am crying my eyes out that my close friend, and a woman who's bailed me out, like Bob did on that particular night, if I fumbled an open, which could kind of set the tone. Can I bring up a moment? I don't know if you'll remember this. It's that Rutgers Big East Women's Championship game, the UConn Huskies versus Rutgers. This is when the rivalry, quote rivalry, was pretty good. A lot of talk back and forth between the two coaches and the programs, et cetera, et cetera. And this is what TV is. Live television can throw some things at you that certainly are unexpected, and you better be able to adjust fairly quickly. Paul Carlson was the producer. We are literally moments to tip. We are doing a live open, and the entire truck loses electricity. And at the time, I'm just panicked about our open, but Bob has got a wide enough prism to understand the entirety of the broadcast field. He knows that Paul Carlson is responsible for the hundreds of thousands of dollars that the truck has cost that night. That Paul Carlson is in some way part of the owner of this event. And if I go back to, it's always about people who are around you. Who are you working with? Can you trust them? Do you believe in them? I start to panic. And he never blinked. This man never blinks. He's like, well, the power's going to come up or it isn't. We'll be prepared either way. And he said, just follow my lead. And by the grace of God, within 30 seconds of tip, somehow magically this truck regains its power. And you just acted like nothing happened. And because he did, I did. And we got through it. Do you remember?
I do. I also remember in that tournament, Niele Ivey, who's the women's coach at Notre Dame now, she was closer to Doris and I than that chair right there, and she tore her ACL right behind me. I'll never forget that. Okay, so now we're doing a game, a UConn at West Virginia men's game, and after the game we go to get something to eat and a beverage, and you have just been named the lead analyst for the Atlantic 10 men's basketball package. And so we're talking about that, and I sense that more than being excited about it, you were sort of a little nervous about it. And I said, why? And she said, well, frankly, I'm concerned about perceptions. I said, perceptions of whom? He said, well, the audience, but even more the coaches in the league, and will they accept me?
Right.
And so you and I were chatting on the phone last week, and you told me a story I didn't even know about. Our boss, Bob Stites.
Yeah.
You want to tell that story?
Sure. So it's probably 1999. And I mean, think about that. It's a while ago. And came down to 3 people that Bob was going to replace a longtime analyst with. And he picked me. Mike Breen was somebody that Bob Picozzi knew quite well. And Bob said, I'm going to run a list of 3 names by you, and I want to know what you think. This is the package, and this is what I expect this person to do. And Mike Breen at the time, who I had worked with the New York Liberty on MSG television, he just told Bob Stites. First of all, the very fact that Bob Stites, who was the director of broadcasting as an associate commissioner of the Atlantic 10, would have put me in the group of three, took an intrepid spirit. So if there are bosses in here and you're debating whether to break a mold or do something different, you know, it takes that intrepid spirit to change things. I've always said if society is going to adopt more fair and equitable practices across anything, race, gender, name it, it takes all of us to change. So I've always felt incredibly indebted that Bob Stites had the spirit to even consider me. And then Mike Green said to him, well, the best analyst is Doris, but I'm not sure you want to go out there on a limb like that. And the second year, so I get through the first year, and we're about to tip off the second year, and I said to Bob Stites, we had gone to get a bite to eat, and I said, Bob, what did your coaches say when you told them I was going to be the person? And he sort of smiled. He said, ooh, do you really want to know that? And for some reason, I guess I have no idea why, but I said, I am curious. And he said, well, I won't tell you exactly what they said, but I'm going to tell you what I told them, which was, she's our analyst. If you have a problem with her in March, you come see me. Until then, I don't want to hear from you. But by December of that year, the great John Chaney, head coach at Temple, had called him up to say something along the lines of, that girl you have, she's all right. Which to me was like the greatest blessing. It remains one of the great compliments to me. That girl, she's all right.
Well, when you started doing men's basketball on ESPN, as you know, I'm very close to Jim Calhoun, and your name came up in a conversation between Jim and me, and he says, Doris, she's not a women's analyst, she's a basketball analyst. Mm-hmm. So you won him over. I'm doing a game once. Katie Smith is a great player at Ohio State, and what do you think, maybe one of the 15 greatest players in WNBA history?
Yeah, unequivocally. Yeah.
In Basketball Hall of Fame. Katie is new at broadcasting at the time. She had done only one game, and Katie and I are doing a Maryland at Minnesota women's game. Katie's very nervous. Midway through the first half, during a timeout, I checked my phone. There's a text from Doris. Bob, you and Katie sound great together. How much experience does Katie have? She sounds absolutely terrific. So meanwhile, I look over at Katie, and she still had that look of on the verge of nausea. The same look that she had the 2 hours before the game, she still has it halfway through the first half. So I elbowed Katie and I hold the phone up. She sees the text is from Doris, she sees what it says. And you should have seen the smile on her face. Mm. It was like someone had a syringe and injected her with all this confidence, because that's how you are regarded in the industry. So when they get words of praise from Doris Burke, the trailblazer,
wow, I appreciate that. I always say this, you know, I think, you know, for people on the distaff side, as you're making your way through this process, it annoys me. There's nothing I find more offensive than women who try to pull other women down. There are going to be hurdles to be had, but I am a believer in that there is room for all of us. And my predecessors made the path easier for me. You know, Jackie McMullen is you know, a person for whom I have such extraordinary respect. She tells stories of being the only woman on press row in the height of the Celtics glory, and Red Auerbach, not giving me the business, but he's not going to just hand Jackie any measure of respect. Jackie's going to go have to earn that, and she did. And I feel like too often women feel like, oh, there's only this much of the pie out there. Never. You have to attack things from an abundance mindset. I want to lift up the woman beside me, or the young man beside me. What's striking over the course of my career, Bob, is how the younger generation of men don't even blink that I'm in the chair. They're just like, oh, Doris, you know, what'd you think of that pick and roll action at the end of that third? I was like, that's a great question. It's been an interesting evolution, but I just always encourage women to welcome other women. There's enough space for all of us.
So ESPN made the decision to part ways with both of the analysts who worked on their #1 NBA broadcast team, Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson, and ESPN decided that its new team would be Mike Green, who's done the NBA Finals about 16, 17 years, something like that, and Doris and Doc Rivers, who had just been fired as the coach of the 76ers. So that meant that in June, you're going to do something that's never been done by a woman before. For the first time, there will be a woman who will do color in a championship series in any of the 4 major professional sports. Never had a woman do color on TV in the World Series. Certainly never had a woman do color in the Super Bowl. Never in the NBA Finals before, never in the Stanley Cup Final. But you are going to do it. How do you feel about that?
Nervous as hell. If you happen to watch Game 1, I'm going to try and not have my voice quiver. And, you know, I do think it will help that I did spend 11 years as a sideline reporter on it. And when you get to an event like that, you've heard that expression, something feels big. The NBA Finals feels big when you arrive there. There are media trucks everywhere. There are hundreds upon hundreds of media from however many countries the NBA is broadcast in. I don't now know the number. It's so many. I would be nervous, but what I take great comfort in is I've got the master, a man who is synonymous with the NBA Finals and Mike Green. The master play-by-play understands how to bring the best out of whichever analyst he happens to be working with. JJ Redick was just named to our team. JJ and I have known each other over 20 years. We were on the phone yesterday. I'm so excited he is sitting beside me. He's got extraordinary skill and unbelievable respect. I always used to say this about Jeff and Mark. You know, when they called the finals, there were moments where it was, you know, Jeff would say something and it was so special because he had lived and breathed the moment, and you could feel that. I have to do it differently, but as I said earlier, Bob, and you know this, the broadcast will not rise and fall with what I say. I mean, my part is important, just like JJ's and Mike's, but we will have the best producer and director. Graphics team will be exceptional. Research will be unbelievable, and the players and the coaches of the NBA have been nothing but extraordinarily supportive of me. So I'll be nervous, but I'm also quite excited.
So in just a few minutes, we're going to start taking questions from the audience. What would your advice be to young women? Are there any women here who have any desire? First of all, are any women here, are you doing color on WSOU for either Seton Hall men's basketball or women's basketball? What would your advice be to a woman who sees you on TV and says, my God, a woman doing the NBA Finals, and she thinks maybe someday she wants to get into broadcasting as an analyst for men's sports? What would your advice be?
I always say 2 things, you know, that I'll expound upon a little bit. I always say you have to be as prepared and as professional as possible. You know, any person in a role where there's any public nature to it is going to be critiqued, and some of those are not going to be very comfortable, and you have to be okay with that. You could be in a room and hear 2 people discussing the same announcer, and their opinions could be 180 degrees from one another. Stylistically, we appeal to different people at different times. The other thing I would say is I think people see where I am now, Bob, and think it happened in the blink of an eye. This has been a journey that started in 1990, and I've been told no far more often than I've been told yes. There have been so many heartbreaks along the way, but the exhilaration of having been in so many extraordinary moments to cover the careers of men's college basketball, women's college basketball, which I played and coached, and now the NBA. The game has shaped my life since I was 7 years of age. And so those 2 things, I always just try to prepare as much as possible. and then be as professional as possible. I'm never late for anything. I'm 5 minutes early at a minimum. I don't miss a shoot around if I'm allowed to go to it. I watch so much NBA basketball. There were times as, my kids were teenagers and they were just like, no, can we watch something other than basketball? So, yeah, those two things.
Okay, we're going to take questions. We have a microphone on each side. Anyone have a question for Doris?
Yeah.
Can you go over the microphone? Why don't you identify yourself?
Hey Doris, how you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
Doing great, doing great.
Good.
So, my name is Richardson. I'm from local college of Montfort University. And my first question I got for you is this. If you were building an all-time NBA roster, an all-time starting five, who would be your starting five person?
Oh, geez, you're just going to put me on the spot. Is it okay if I do the gentleman that I covered? Would that work for you?
Yes, it would be.
Yeah, just because, I've had the incredible opportunity to watch so many players come across. I mean, I'd have to start with LeBron James. It's been, I think people look at LeBron and see this extraordinarily physically gifted person, but the fact is, LeBron has worked as hard as any human being I've ever seen. And I think, excellence in anything in life is hard. When you are able to sustain excellence, it's really special. So I begin with LeBron. And I'm going positionless because I can now that the NBA is positionless.
Good.
And these are in no particular order except LeBron. He is always first in my mind. I will have Kevin Durant. People want to define Kevin exclusively as a scorer. Right now, he is like top 3, I believe, in field goal percentage against. He's had to anchor a Phoenix defense, and he's been up to the task. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 2-time MVP. This is so positionless. I'm going to go Nikola Jokic and Steph Curry.
That would just be insane.
And I know I'm leaving somebody out, and this is going to go viral, and I'm going to pay the price. And that's totally okay, but I just picked the guys that I've covered. And, you could say that you're a little guard light, except I got Steph Curry, so I'm not really guard light.
Yeah.
And LeBron can play any position he wants.
You have a call from Philadelphia, by the way. Go ahead.
Thank you both for being here. I'm Michael Stam. I'm a senior here. My question had to do with, you brought up how many people it takes to put on excellent broadcasts. Is there anything that you have seen from all the broadcasts that you've done that a producer can do to help you guys to really boost a broadcast to the next level?
Great question.
Oh, big time. The producer sets the whole tone. Doris mentioned before the name, talking about when the power went out, Rutgers, Paul Carlson. If I have a godfather in this business, it's Paul. Because Paul really did more to help me make a transition from a local TV sports anchor to a freelance TV play-by-play announcer. The producer sets the whole tone for the whole thing. And what we do for a living is really not that difficult to do when everything goes the way it's supposed to go. But when things go south, like the power goes out, that's where that really tests the mettle of a professional. And so Paul, that night, set the tone. And absolutely, I would go this far. You could have great announcers, and if you have a mediocre producer, you won't have a great show.
I would say the single most important attribute I like in a producer is calmness. There are going to be times where the bug is going to go out on their show, or the graphics machine, or perhaps the director next to you or the associate director might be new, and there will be mistakes made. If you are sitting in that producer chair, I don't care if the truck is on fire. You should never let your announcers feel that. You shouldn't. In your tone of voice, if you need to explain something, that's fine. If you need to say, the bug is down, Bob, I need you to give time and score a little bit more often than you might. Or, Doris, the replay machines are out, do not request a replay. Calmness. And it's going to be hard because you would be tested in that position. But I've had many producers come to the announce table after the show and say, X, Y, and Z happened. I go, oh my God, thank God I didn't know that. That's your job.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for both of you coming and speaking to all of us today. My name is Justin Ostrick. I'm a current student athlete here at Seton Hall. Currently a grad student, so transitioning out of my student athlete career to get into the field of sports media. So Doris, what was your transition like going from a student athlete into, obviously you went right into coaching, like back to where, into your sport, but what was that transition like to like leaving behind your sport for that last time?
Abrupt. It was abrupt because literally in my final game my senior year I blew my knee out. And I had a chance to go overseas to Sweden or Ireland to play. And the surgeon said, I need to know what you're going to do. Because I'm either going to reconstruct it or I'm going to shave the 2 ligaments and you're going to move on. And I chose to move on. And, you know, I would say if you want to do what we do, you need to get behind a microphone and in front of a camera as quickly as possible. And I would also tell you, there's no job that's ever too small. I talked jokingly about doing Providence College women's basketball on radio. I kid you not. I'm no longer married, but the only person who was listening was my then husband, or somebody in a car. But it'll shock you when you think the job you're doing, nobody's paying attention to you. Within 3 weeks of my participating in radio, the then commissioner of the Big East Conference, Dave Gavin, I run into him at the Providence College men's game, and he stopped me and he said, I've heard you on those women's games. You have potential. Keep working. There is no job too small. I've watched Big East digital reporters be in the freezing cold at a lacrosse game or a softball game. Wherever you can get your repetition is where you build skill and confidence. So don't bemoan the job you don't have. No matter how small the job you're doing is, do it to the best of your ability and you will be shocked at how incremental changes start to happen. It takes time.
Good.
Good afternoon to both, and thank you very much for your time here with us. My name is Christopher Britis. I am a junior journalism major. I am also the media relations and public and PR chair for the Seton Hall Sociology Club. And my question does come from a sort of sociological angle, considering the different groups of people who hold different ideas and different ideas regarding themselves, each other, and their identities. Considering the recent amount of political and social polarization that has been happening in our country and around the world, can it be said to any degree that women's sports or advocating for women's sports is a uniquely progressive idea or not?
Is it uniquely progressive?
I think it's just routine at this point. I mean, I want to watch something that's going to entertain me. So I'll look at what's on TV, and I'm laughing. It's not going to surprise Doris or my friends in the audience. I have 3 TVs in my family room. When we redid our family room, getting new furniture, we bought this, and this. And the man in the furniture store, I explained to him how we have 3 TVs in our family room, and I'm looking for a piece of furniture that's big enough for the 3 TVs to fit. I could tell I lost him. And he said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah, what?" He says, "Why do you have 3 TVs in your family room?" And I said, "Because 4 won't fit." So when I decide which 3 games I'm going to watch each night, I'm going to watch the 3 games that are most entertaining, and whether they're men's games or women's games is immaterial to me. I mean, I got to tell you, when Caitlin Clark was playing against Michigan, going for the all-time women's scoring record, I mean, that was the game on the big TV in the middle. So no, I mean, I no longer regard it as, I don't think I'm progressive because I enjoy women's sports. Are there some people in the country who, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the blowback on social media to Caitlin, oh yeah, well, I don't pay any attention to that.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's uniquely progressive. What I know is sometimes it feels to me as it relates to women's sports, society is somewhat behind the stakeholders of the respective games. The people who speak most powerfully sometimes in support of the women are NBA players. And I remember telling Rebecca Lobo, Ryan Rucco, and Holly Rowe, all three good friends of mine who cover the women's tournament, there was a 2-week stretch last year where the single most compelling figure in basketball, at any level, was Caitlin Clark. And the reason I know that is because the ratings told me that was the case. She was outrating NBA games in that particular, not everyone, probably not. But they had a unique opportunity, and thankfully they met that moment, and that young woman seems to have the ability to meet that moment. And I said to you earlier, it takes everyone to change things. And I remember over the years, the way players would interact with me when I was on the sideline. And the way LeBron or Steph or some of these great players interacted with me, a casual viewer at home, male or female, was affected by the interaction because there was respect on both sides of that. Why I always say it takes everyone to change. I don't think we answered your question, but we gave you pretty good answers.
Thank you.
Good.
Hi both. It was lovely to hear from you both this afternoon. I wanted to ask you, Doris, I've been following the NBA for years, and kind of seeing your journey has been really inspiring for me to become such a well-respected figure in a male sport and a male-dominated industry. And I'm only a freshman, but my goal one day is to kind of work in that male-dominated sector, English Premier League. I would love to, ATP, Formula One. And I just wanted to know kind of what your advice would be for a woman trying to get into such a field, and how you can gain that respect and be someone that everyone looks to and appreciates.
Yeah. So some of the things I said earlier, and the Premier League is fascinating to me. And last year at the NBA Finals, I had run into 3 Brazilian broadcasters, 2 men and 1 woman. And I was talking about how different the NFL is, in terms of sort of being that last bastion in the United States where women are gaining, you look at Mina Kimes and Beth Mullins and sort of how well they've done, Hannah Storm, Andre Kramer. You have to be an expert in your field. And once you have gained the acceptance of the players and the coaches, and you do that by showing up every day, by asking really smart questions, by being undaunted to keep the company you're keeping, that will grow your relationships with the stakeholders, and inevitably I think that changes opinions. Because again, television is a visual medium. Bob referred to this a little bit earlier as he was talking about looks and things. It's a visual medium. It's a very powerful thing. It's not just about what you say. What is your posture? What's your tone of voice? What's your cadence when you're saying things? And how is the person you're interacting with reacting to you? And the best way to get good reactions is to be prepared and to ask good questions. And I have no doubt if you're already a freshman and you're doing that, you're going to be prepared when the moment comes.
Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here. Before I ask my question, I just want to say on your point that young men don't bat an eye. I just want to say that I'm an accounting major. It's my last semester here.
Yeah.
It's a Friday afternoon, and I wouldn't miss this for the world because I saw Doris Burke on the posters.
Thank you so much.
You talked a lot about your experiences as a mother. How has your experiences as a mother impacted your career? Anyway.
Yes, that's a great question. Somebody was asking me the most challenging part of my job, and I remember when we were thinking about having a second child, I said to my husband, can I afford to stay home for the first several years? He's like, it'll be tight, but we can do it. And thankfully my career unfolded slowly as my children were getting older. In 1997, they would have been 5 and 3, and it was at that moment, the inception of the formation of the WNBA, that really changed a woman's opportunity to make a living as a color analyst, to do what Billy Raftery or Dick Vitale did. Because I could work 30 games in the summer and 30 in the winter, and and essentially have a full-time job, but still have these windows of time where I was home all day, every day. And again, I go back to divine providence because I would have never stayed in the job had I had the travel schedule I had when they were older. But I'm not going to lie. I mean, there were moments where I pulled out of the driveway and I would cry. You know, if it were March Madness, and I knew that I was going to be on the road for 5 days, and I was going to get to go home for 2, and then I was going to have to go out for another 5. I mean, it's hard. And I remember distinctly Matthew, you know, you have the storm door with the glass, and he's at the door crying, and I'm in the car trying to pull out. I'm going to cry now. And he's 29. But I remember pulling out and having to stop at the corner and just cry. And, you know, I have very good friends who are educators, and they would say to me, I think in an attempt to strengthen me, you get more time with your children than I do because, you know, for X number of months a year, you're home all day, every day. It's been the single greatest challenge for me, and I think for any professional, is trying to do your job exceptionally well, but do the single most important job you have, which is being a mom or a parent. To do that well. There's nothing more important than that job. And I'll tell you the truth, my son is in golf, but he is funny as hell. And he does some impersonations of me. I always used to say to him, you could be a stand-up comic, and I've given you enough material for like 6 acts. And he's hysterical when he makes fun of me. But anyway, that's probably been, it's been hard, to just put it frankly.
Thank you.
You've added one more role recently.
I'm a grandmother, twice over. 21 months and 3 months.
Doris is coming off for her All-Star break. When's the last time you did a game?
A week ago, is that more, or 10 days ago, yeah.
And tomorrow, she's doing the next Celtics game in Madison Square Garden, and it will be the debut of the revised #1
Yes.
ESPN team
Yes,
with
that's
J.J.
true.
Riddick joining Doris and Mike Green because Doc Rivers got back into coaching. You have time for one more question.
Hi, first off, thank you for being here. It's been great to hear from you both. My name is Kristen McGuire. I'm a senior here at Seton Hall, and I'm also a manager for our women's basketball team.
Love it.
Yep. You've obviously broken a lot of barriers being a prominent female in a heavily male-dominated industry. And so my question is, what sorts of changes have you seen over the course of your career in terms of gender inclusivity, and what sorts of changes do you want to see moving forward?
Yeah. Whew, I mean, it's been a journey, as you can imagine. I would say the level of acceptance has you know, dramatically changed. I don't know if you remember this person, but there's a great basketball writer by the name of Jim O'Connell, AP, legendary basketball writer, no longer with us. He stopped me at a Big East championship game one time. And I had known him over the years. You always see him at the Big East games here and there and everything. And always very cordial and kind. And he pulled me aside one time and he said, I want you to know something. He said, when I first heard your voice on a men's basketball game, I thought to myself, what is he doing? What is she doing there? I mean, think about it. It took some guts for him to even say that to me. But then he said, I just want you to know, I put that thought down and I listened to what you had to say. And he said, and you belong. And I thought it was like one of the greatest compliments. So the level of acceptance has changed drastically. Listen, there are going to be people on the NBA finals listening who say, she has no business being there. It's already been stated, and quite harshly. And please know, I understand, and I understood over the course of my career some of the objection to me. Did I ever play or coach men's basketball? No, I have not. Have I ever played or coached in the NBA? No, I have not. And what's the first thing we all do when something is strange to us? If it hits your ears, or you're unaccustomed to something, what's the first thing we typically do? We pull back. We go, what is this? It's the open-mindedness and the presence of women is starting to grow. And so, do societal changes happen as quickly as we want? Absolutely not. There are still cultural barriers that women and minorities have to go through. But I can promise you this. I know my friends who are in the business aren't going away. I will go away soon because I'm going to retire soon, but I'm not going away, if you know what I mean. I'm just going to keep coming, and eventually you're going to have to come around to it. So just hang in, and it's not going to be easy, and that's okay. Nothing worthwhile is ever easy. It's not going to be easy for any of the men in this business trying to break in. It is so competitive now, it's brutal. I feel very lucky I entered at a time when the interest wasn't there. So just hang tough. Like, you're going to need to be tough. There's going to be some ugly things said. I ask my friends, say, like, how do you deal with it? I go, what do you want me to do? Quit? I'm not going to quit. I love what I do. I can't quit.
Well, Doris, I want to thank you for taking time to be here today. When Jane McManus, DJ's predecessor, first to me to ask me if I would like to do an event here, and she explained what the parameters would be, and she said, now, frankly, we want to rely on your contacts to get us a big-time guest. Who do you have in mind? The first person I mentioned was you.
Thank you.
And the last thing I'm going to say is, you said when you saw Beth in the Monday Night Football game, you cried. Well, during game one of the NBA Finals, I'm going to be crying for the same reason.
You'll make me cry
So
now.
thank you very much.
Turn again for Bob Picozzi and Doris Burke. At this time, I'd like to call on Seton Hall Deputy Athletic Director and Senior Women's Administrator Tatum Kalitz for a special presentation to Doris.
I get a jersey. Are my Providence people going to be okay with it? Oh, thank you so very much. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Well, thank you all. This concludes our event today. Let's hear it again one more time for Bob Picozzi and Doris Burke. Those of you who are coming to our post-event reception, please exit the building and go to your right to the glass doors to check in. Stay tuned for our next event on March 26th. Students who are going to be in attendance for Bob's private workshop, please report to room 206 here in the University Center no later than 2:15. Thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful weekend.